So apparently, through the use of LIDAR, they have discovered that there are enormous structures underneath the Great Pyramid that go kilometers deep into the earth.
Something strange is happening on the Giza Plateau. For years, we believed every secret buried under the desert had already been uncovered. But we have been wrong.
So this is pretty much breaking news because the new findings were announced at a press conference held by the team who was studying the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Recently, a team of researchers used high-precision LIDAR to scan the sands around the Great Sphinx, and the sensors have returned shapes no one expected. There are new lines, angles, depths, and a structure too large, too perfect, and too intentional to ignore hidden below the sands. The second Sphinx. Anatomy of a hidden giant. The deeper the team studied the scans, the more frightening the truth became. This was not a vague shadow under the ground. This was not a random shape created by nature. This was a built structure. A massive stone body hiding below the sand, shaped with a level of accuracy that should not exist underground. The team realized they were facing something that was not only real, but carefully designed. High-resolution LIDAR images confirmed this. When the outlines were enhanced, the shape showed sharp edges that were too straight to be natural.
I saw on the Sphinx was not compatible with Sahara Desert hyper-arid conditions.
These edges formed clean vertical walls that matched the style of large stone monuments from the Old Kingdom. The base of the structure was carved into a clear rectangle, a design choice always linked to controlled construction. This is the same technique used for temples and for the original Sphinx. This proved that whoever built this underground giant knew what they were doing. The most disturbing part was the condition of the surfaces. Unlike the Great Sphinx, which has suffered thousands of years of wind and water damage, the buried structure still had clean surfaces. These protected surfaces contained marks that looked like intentional cuts. These marks matched the same type of tool marks that appear on Old Kingdom stone blocks. This suggests the builders used similar tools or even the same method. That level of preservation is impossible unless the structure was sealed quickly after it was built. Geological teams studied the rock beneath the structure and found clear signs that the bedrock had been shaped by human hands. This means the builders did not just carve the figure, they carved the entire foundation.
Some of the most extensive restorations of the Sphinx, when blocks were applied to that rock-hewn core body of the Sphinx to repair damage.
This makes the buried Sphinx a fully engineered monument, not a simple statue placed on the ground. Then came the most shocking discovery. Weathering experts compared erosion on the buried Sphinx with erosion on the surrounding rock.
The identity of the pharaoh who built the Sphinx is fiercely debated.
The patterns did not match. The buried structure had erosion that belonged to a very old, wet climate. This climate ended long before the time the Great Sphinx was believed to have been built. If true, this means the hidden Sphinx may be older than the main Sphinx itself. That could potentially destroy the accepted timeline of Egyptian history. Yet, even with all this evidence, some Egyptologists called the find a distortion or an illusion. However, these same people privately pushed the excavation team to stay quiet and sign strict agreements. This raised serious questions about why they wanted it hidden. If this second Sphinx was real, then ancient Egypt clearly built it for a reason. So why did they leave only one above the ground? The answer seems to be buried in an old belief system built on pairs and balance. LIDAR reveals what no eye could see.
Who come to marvel at the immense pyramids, forbidding tomb, and a mysterious stone sentinel known as...
The discovery began with something that looked harmless. In early 2024, a group of researchers from Europe, Japan, and the United States brought military-grade LIDAR scanners to the Giza Plateau. LIDAR is a scanning tool that sends rapid pulses of light into the ground. These pulses bounce back and form a 3D map of whatever is buried under the surface.
Reanalyze the seismic data, and I'm convinced at this point
the team was only meant to check for hidden cracks and unstable bedrock around the Great Sphinx. This meant they had no idea their scans would uncover something that would shake the entire history of ancient Egypt. When the first images loaded onto their screens, the team froze. The scans showed a massive shape sitting about 30 feet below the surface. It had smooth sides, sharp edges, and a long rectangular base carved into the ground. The shape was too exact, too balanced, and too deliberate to be a random pile of rock. What shocked the team even more was that the shape had the same proportions as the Great Sphinx. The height, the base, the length, and the overall outline matched it with frightening accuracy. It looked like a second Sphinx was lying under the sand, hidden from the world. The researchers checked for errors because LIDAR sometimes creates noise or distorted images when the ground is uneven. They ran new scans from different angles. They adjusted the settings. They even changed machines. Yet the same shape appeared every single time. To make sure this was not a mistake, teams in Germany, Japan, and the United States repeated the scan remotely using satellite-supported LIDAR. All of them produced the same results. At that point, there was no way to deny it. Something huge and human-made was buried under the Giza Plateau. As the scans became clearer, more disturbing details appeared. The buried structure showed vertical edges cut in clean lines.
The Giza Plateau was as dry 4,500 years ago as it is today. And yet, here is a structure.
The base looked carved with intention, not formed by nature. Even more shocking, the LIDAR picked up patterns on the outer walls that looked like tool marks. These marks matched the same cutting style seen on Old Kingdom monuments. This meant the buried structure was carved using techniques used in ancient Egypt. It was not a modern object. It was not a glitch. It was a hidden ancient monument the size of the Great Sphinx. But something felt wrong. The sand above the structure had an unusual density. Normally, desert sand forms loose layers, but this sand was packed tightly in a way that looked unnatural. It reminded geologists of ancient backfill, which is a method used when a structure is intentionally covered. This raised a terrifying question. If the sand was not placed there by nature, then someone in the ancient world purposely buried this giant structure. That idea changed everything. A hidden sphinx was clearly present beneath the sand. So what exactly did this buried giant look like before the authorities blocked the investigation completely? A starry secret: astronomical alignment. The moment scientists realized the buried sphinx was not placed randomly, the tone of the entire investigation changed. What looked like a simple shift of a few degrees suddenly became a threat to everything written in history books. This structure was not pointing in the same direction as the visible sphinx. It was turning its stone face toward something far more disturbing. It was locked onto a star that shaped ancient religion and controlled life itself in ancient Egypt. Experts studied the LIDAR data and noticed a 6-degree tilt to the east. At first, this angle looked like a mistake, but when astronomers examined it with star mapping software, the truth struck them like a shockwave.
The Sphinx and the pyramids as astronomically connected monuments, because the Sphinx, as I mentioned, is perfectly aligned on due east.
The buried Sphinx lined up perfectly with the rising of Sirius. Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky. In ancient Egypt, Sirius was not just a star. It was tied directly to the goddess Isis. Isis was worshipped as a mother, healer, magician, and protector of kings. She was also tied to the yearly flooding of the Nile. The rise of Sirius marked the moment the Nile would swell and bring water across farmlands. Without that flood, Egypt would starve. That is why Sirius was seen as a symbol of rebirth. This means the buried Sphinx was not a simple statue. It was a direct marker of a cosmic event that shaped the entire survival of ancient Egypt. This alone was shocking, but the next detail was worse. When astronomers aligned the second Sphinx to the oldest sky models, they found that its position did not match the sky of the period when the Great Sphinx is believed to have been built. It matched an older sky, a much older sky. The alignment fits a star position from around 10,500 BCE. This date is thousands of years before the first pharaohs existed. Historians refuse to accept any theory that says Egyptian civilization existed that early. They argue that humans were still living in simple communities at that time. But the buried Sphinx points to a different reality. It suggests that someone in deep antiquity knew the sky with extreme precision. They understood star cycles and understood how Sirius moved across the heavens. They built a monument around that knowledge. The idea is simple, yet terrifying. Only a monument built thousands of years earlier would match the position of Sirius during that ancient time. This means the buried Sphinx may not be from the Old Kingdom. It may not even be from early dynastic Egypt. It may belong to a forgotten civilization that existed before recorded history. This idea destroys the modern timeline of Egypt. It wipes out decades of accepted dating. It challenges the belief that complex knowledge came slowly. The buried Sphinx shows that advanced astronomy existed early, then disappeared, only to be rediscovered later. Researchers now believe the two Sphinxes may have represented cosmic balance. One guarded the path of the sun. The hidden one guarded the path of Sirius. Together they may have symbolized life, death, rebirth, and the connection between the heavens and the earth. The cosmic alignment was clear, but scientists needed more than sky charts. They needed physical proof, and once digging began, the sand revealed something far worse than anyone expected. Ancient Egypt's philosophy of duality. The moment experts accepted that a second Sphinx might truly be buried under the Giza Plateau, a disturbing question rose to the surface. Why would ancient builders go through the trouble of carving two massive stone guardians, only to hide one underground? The answer did not come from modern archaeology. It came from something older, deeper, and far more unsettling.
Imagine who could offer a large quantity of wine, expensive wine. Who else except someone from the elite?
The ancient Egyptian belief in strict duality. Egyptian religion was built on pairs. Nothing existed alone. Life was balanced by death. Order was balanced by chaos. The sun was balanced by the moon. Every god had a partner or an opposite force. This belief system shaped how Egyptians built their temples, designed their statues, and created their rituals. Because of this, it was normal for guardians to appear in pairs. They were placed at entrances, corridors, and tombs to protect both sides of the spiritual journey. This is why the idea of twin sphinxes is not strange at all. It fits perfectly into the old Egyptian system. Ancient texts from the Temple of Edfu tell a chilling story that lines up with the buried structure. These texts speak of two lions of the horizon. These two lions were said to guard the world at dawn and sunset. They watched over the rising and falling of the sun. These two lions were described with bodies very similar to the Sphinx. This means the idea of twin guardians existed long before the time historians claim the Sphinx was built. There is even older evidence. Archaeologists found cylinder seals from the early dynastic period that show two Sphinx-like creatures standing back to back. These seals were created thousands of years before the pyramids. This suggests that the builders of Giza may have been copying an even older tradition. The surviving Sphinx may not be the first of its kind. It may be a continuation of a forgotten design. As researchers compared religious texts with the LIDAR scans, a new theory formed. Many scholars now believe the visible Sphinx represented Ra, the sun god. Ra controlled the daylight and the power of the kings. But if there was a second Sphinx, it may have represented a powerful goddess connected to night, rebirth, or danger. The two strongest possibilities are Isis and Sekhmet. Isis was the mother goddess tied to magic and the star Sirius. Sekhmet was the goddess of war and plague, feared for her destructive power. Either choice would explain why a later pharaoh might want to remove or hide a statue that represented a rival or a dangerous deity. This makes the buried Sphinx not only a mystery, but a sign of a deep and violent shift in ancient power. But this religious motive was only part of the story. The exact placement of the buried Sphinx revealed something even more shocking. Ancient builders used a level of astronomical knowledge that should not have existed at that time.